Okay, I would like to welcome everyone for our first live interview with the manufacturer and the designers series that we're going to hold off in the next coming days. Our guest today is needs no introduction. He's Mr. Hans-Ole Vitus, who's the chief designer and owner of Vitus Audio in Denmark. And we will basically ask him a few questions in regards to the history of the company and a little bit about himself, as well as his design principles, as well as the way he looks at the sectors, what differentiates Vitus from most of the other companies in terms of their production capabilities, as well as the meticulous attention to detail, I should say. And then we will talk about a few of their products. And once we're done with our 6 questions, we will take questions from our viewers as well. First of all, welcome, Hans-Ole. Thanks a lot for doing this for us. I think it's going to be very informative for our viewers. First of all,
thank you for having me.
First of all, let's start off a little bit, learning a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the Vitus Audio's history.
Okay, yeah, well, that could be a very long story, but as I promised you, I will try and keep it brief. I think most people probably want to ask questions and not hear me doing the whole marketing charade. So I'll try and keep it short. First of all, I'm old, so in Europe this is actually almost way past my bedtime. Just so you know, if I look a little bit tired, it's been a long day. I actually normally start around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, it's 2100 hour here at this point. Anyway, the foundation of the company comes from my interests in in music. I've played in street marching bands, playing the drum, and I played in bands after that when I was from when I was I guess 9 years old and until I was about 18, 19-year old, and that's when the education and all that took over, and girls and other stuff. But that's where the interest for music comes from. So I play drums. I goof around with guitars as well. So it's the musical background that kind of got me interested in electronics, and that's why I started the education. Got my first stereo when I was 13 years old, I think, and it probably worked for about a week, and that's when I started taking things apart and didn't understand what was going on and ruined a perfectly good system. So yeah, I had to learn how to basically to repair it to get it working again. So fast forwarding to January 1995, this is actually when I founded the company. The company at the time was just called Vitus Audio. Today it's AVA Group. There's a long story behind that. So from January 1995 and until about 2003 was actually only R&D, nothing else, just R&D. In 2003, we went to a show in Stockholm just to test kind of get a feeling, some feedback from the market. We also went to a show in Copenhagen. This was in the first quarter of 2003. And then in the second quarter of 2003, we actually went to the Frankfurt show, which is basically known as the Munich show today. If I remember correctly, this was actually the last time it was held in Frankfurt. Then the next thing we did, which is basically where we count from the actual start of our market presence, so to speak, or real introduction to the market, was CES 2004. So when people ask me, so when did the company actually start? I always tend to say 2004 because from a mentality point of view, this is where it actually got started. But yeah, there was about 8 years of R&D before that.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about about your production, which you have invested heavily in the recent years, and it is quite state of the art in terms of my experience when I was there. Um, and I haven't really seen too many companies take the extra step to do what you're doing. Maybe there are a few, but not too many. So if you can give us briefly the production of your boards and what you use and.
Yeah, sure. Again, this is a very, very long talk, and I will try to keep it short. I mean, it is true that we have, from the PCB point of view, we have the full production in house, and when I say full production, it's not the actual PCB board itself, because that involves a lot of chemistry and chemicals and all of that. And yeah, we are in Denmark, and just getting the approvals for all the waste that comes from that production is an absolute nightmare. So that's a part that we're not qualified to do. So we let others actually do that. But when we get the raw PCB board, everything from mounting the components, soldering the components, QCing the final boards and everything, we do in house. And yeah, we invested heavily over the past multiple years. I think in total, we have probably invested. That's the vapor phase. So we'll get into that in a second. We've probably invested plus 500,000 euro or so just in machinery for PCB production, and it actually comes down to a very in brackets simple thing, which is that we are different. I mean, the standard, just to give a few examples, the standard PCB thickness is 1.6 millimeters. Sorry for all the Americans and others. We're still on metric system here, and I can't convert on top of my head. So 1.6 millimeters is the standard. Well, our standards is 2 millimeters. So already there, from a percentage point of view, we're a lot. We went up a lot, and on top of that, the thickness of the cover layers we use. So the standard used to be 35 micrometers, and then it went to 70 micrometers. And you can get more than that, and we normally start at 110 micrometers to 140 micrometers and 210 micrometers. And on top of that, when we do multiple layers, the norm is that on the internal layers you still do 35 micrometers. But if we go for our power amplifiers at 210 micrometers, the internal layers are 210 as well. So what does that mean? Well, it means that just from soldering the boards, the profile of how you actually heat the board up is completely different to a normal board. And so if we wanted to use an external subcontractor, they would have to put their whole line on complete stop, and they would have to program for our line, for our boards, and run the boards, which are in this industry, compared to others, low quantities and always special, to then run our boards and then reset everything and start up again. And during financial crisis, that's not a big issue. But when we have a normal run, it's just not something that a normal EMS would ever touch, because it's too difficult and it's too time consuming. And so because of this, and also during development, we just decided at some point that we would be a lot better off if we could actually control that in-house, both from a quality point of view, but also from a turnaround point of view, for doing initial engineering samples to zero production runs and to full production. And if we find something which is needs to be fixed or changed, we can do a full rerun in 24 hours, basically. So this is some of the reasons, and we use machines from mainly Switzerland and Germany. So the solder paste machine for the SMD part is from Switzerland. The pick and place machine is from Switzerland. The Weber phase that you showed before is from Germany. And the special thing about vapor phase, that's the pick and place machine from SMTech in Switzerland. So that is probably that's around a 200,000 euro machine or so. And the other thing you're showing there is actually Japanese from Omron, which is an AOI. So this is doing optical QC on the boards. But the special thing with vapor phase is that there's two type of soldering types in SMD. There's the reflow oven, which the best way I can describe it is it's a very big toaster, and you have a conveyor belt going through it, and you have different zones, so you actually heat it differently in the different zones. This is the fast and the cheap way of running surface mounted soldering. The problem with that is you easily get something called shadow effect. So if you have a large component and right next to that a small component, there will be some areas that doesn't have the same temperature as the rest, and that's where you get bad solderings and all that stuff. With vapor phase, this is the slow and very uneconomic way of doing things. It's all done with vapor, so everything in the chamber gets the same temperature, and therefore the quality of the solderings are just better. And this is also why in history this was primarily used for space, aerospace, military, and medical equipment, and also of course automotive, because of obvious reason they need a much higher quality, and they don't really care about cost. And so this was just a natural choice for us. That is show there's also from SMTech. That's actually the storage for all the SMD components. And it's a long story just about that, but yeah, all the fancy techniques of mounting and soldering and all of that stuff doesn't help anything for quality if the components is not stored in the correct way. We've spent a lot in that.
This is as far as I know, it's humidity, temperature, and pressure controlled, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, just the compressor for running this is easily 10,000 euro just for running that, because again, you have to have a compressor which doesn't have any humidity in it, because if that generates any humidity, it that destroys the whole idea from the storage. And so it's again, we're into the medical type of specs to actually be able to run it in a proper manner. So it's a huge investment, but this is basically the first step of the quality that we're looking for. So it really starts at this level.
Okay.
From a manufacturing point of view, of course, it starts from design, but from a manufacturing point of view, it really starts on the boards itself. And I have to say that these machines and all this we see here is actually something that we did in cooperation with ABM Tech, which is our son, running Eluxity. So it's a combined investment between us.
Okay. Now, in terms of to clarify some of the sort of questions that I have been getting over the last couple of years. Can you tell our audience in terms of your production, do you outsource anything? Do you basically buy anything off the shelf? Do you have any parts of your electronics produced in any parts of the world? Can you enlighten our viewers regarding those points?
Just a second. Very important detail here. Coffee.
Okay.
Yes, I can. I can see people writing. Just as I cannot reply to any of the stuff that's written there. So us is in charge of that.
Leave those questions to me.
Yeah,
we will.
I'm trying to answer everything here, but I'll try to stick with the program. Okay. Yes, we do. But it's very few things. So the things where we do not feel that we have the right level of expertise, or at the present time, or we need a technology, we will buy from someone else. So, for instance, our USB board or interface is from another company in Europe, and our streaming board is from another company, actually a Korean company that many uses in the industry. But that has a complete different set of things to it, which is licensing and all of that stuff on top. And we also use a sample rate conversion module from the old Anagram Tech, which is called Engineered today from Switzerland. And I think that's pretty much it. And yes, that's digital. And it's not that we don't have the digital capabilities. It's just that we don't have the time for everything. And sometimes we just need to, jump over where the fence is lowest, so to speak. But we do spend a lot of time evaluating all sorts of different possibilities. I will say that apart from that, we start with building our own design PCBs in-house, and all our products are built in our factory, are tested in our factory, fully qualified in our factory. We don't outsource any of the production as such. No. I mean, that's one part where I would like to go, or just to compare us with others. For instance, Boulder. One of the things that I really like to have that Boulder has is CNC machines in-house, so we can do our own chassis parts as well. But we just don't have the time at this point, and we don't have the expertise. So that is one area where, we design everything. I design all the mechanics in SolidWorks. And it's outsourced to a local subcontractor that actually used to be a part of B&O. So they really know what they're doing. In Denmark, it's like half an hour's drive away, like Gryphon and like B&O and like, Denmark is small. So yeah, everything is just around the corner.
1.5 hours anyway.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another informative question that you will basically tell us the answers to. I think this has been asked to me during my live interview with the show a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago. I lost the sense of time thanks to this lockdown. But you have 3 series of products, and among these, what are the differences? So you have the reference series, which is your entry line, and then on top you have the signature series, and at the top masterpiece series. You have the 4th line, which is the design studio, which is another line, but that's completely custom. But for your mainstream series, what are the differences between those 3 series to enlighten our viewers?
Okay. Well, it actually, to give a bit of background to it, we actually started with the signature series, and this is where all the technology that we started with, the 8 years of R&D from 95 to 2003-4, was really all about signature series. So what we showed at CES in 2004 was the first version of the SM100s. They were called the SM100, and the SL100, and I can't remember. I think we might have had the SP100 at the time as well. So the signature series was basically where we started. Mm-hmm. And then I was starting to look at trickling down that to a less expensive series. But this is around the time where we got a new distributor in Russia, and there came Masterpiece. So Masterpiece actually came first, and after that we jumped to the reference series, and so signature series is basically where the core start for us is. The difference between signature and Masterpiece was a real tough one, to be honest, because we just designed the signature series, and we basically thought that, of course, this was the best that we could ever make at the time. And when we were presented with the opportunity to design something where price was even less important than the signature series, it was one of those head-scratching experiences, and it was also a very long one. It was a challenge because how do you improve and better something that you think is the best you can build? So it took some years. And it's actually a very, very long talk about all the details, but the bottom line is it is more of everything. I mean, the first thing that we went absolutely nuts with was the power supply. So power supply is everything. If the power supply is not the best you can make, what comes after is secondary. And this is one of the things I realized, quite natural, but we all have to learn. So I learned it fairly quickly, and that's why we have all these custom transformers and all of that. So the masterpiece is basically, if you take the current version, the SM103, which is our signature mono amps, that's what SM stands for. The SM100 it's 100 watts, but it's not like the SM103 is 103 watt. It's a bit more, so the number is kind of less meaningful today. It's really just telling that it originates from the 100. It's version 3. So we took that, and this is two fairly heavy chassis, and we divided them per channel into 2 chassis again. So now the masterpiece mono amps are 4 chassis. And the first thing we did is basically separating everything that touches signals with everything that has to do with logic, microprocessors, all of that noisy stuff, to separate that completely. So when you see a pair of mono amps, a masterpiece mono amps, one chassis where there's not even an LED in is the amplifier, and the other box that has the microcontroller and all of that, the display, that's actually just the power supply. But it's not just the power supply, fully regulated power supply. It's just everything taking to a level which I don't even know what to call it. So it's really separating noise so that the signal to noise ratio is the best we can possibly make, because the devil is in the details, and so it is with signals. So you lose a lot of information in the noise floor. And of course you can argue, yeah, but you can't hear the difference between 80 dB and minus 80 dB and minus 90 dB. So what is 110 or 120 dB? True, but there is a difference anyway.
Yeah, you hear more.
Don't ask me to explain in detail. I'll need to call somebody in. So this is the same for the preamp and the phono stages. It's the same for the DAC and the transport. Then, not to go too far, because once I get started, this will be a long night or morning. So signature to masterpiece. Masterpiece is separate chassis. It's everything just taking to the next level, refining stuff. We don't go to the 4 chassis preamp or 4 chassis mono amp or 6 chassis or whatever. I mean, we do go to extremes, but we do also stop at some point where, if we can't measure nor hear the difference, yeah, maybe somebody else can, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for us then. Then jumping to the reference series, this is then our so-called entry level, if you can talk about that at the price level, but for us it's the entry level. And this was actually at the time almost more difficult to make than the masterpiece series, because how do we compromise? I'm not very good at compromising, apart from clothes. That's not something that well, keeps me warm. But I'm not very good at compromising when it comes to designing these things or anything for that matter. And then having to design something which I would still want to have in my own house, because that is really a key thing for Vitus Audio. It has to be a product that I would happily live with in my own house. And if it doesn't meet that criteria, I don't care how cool it looks, and if we could have a good margin or whatever it is, or a fantastic marketing thing around it, I don't care about that. I care about pride of ownership, really. And if I can't happily own a product, it's just not a Vitus Audio product. So that was our task. And the first thing you notice, of course, is that it's a different approach to chassis. It's more conventional, where signature and masterpiece are thick aluminum, simply made but massive. Lots of care taken into anti-magnetics and all that stuff. I mentioned custom transformers. In Signature and Masterpiece we use for power amps and also the preamps actually. Anything but digital, we use UI transformers. And then they're big and they're hugely expensive. And in reference series we use IE transformers, which still has a lot of the values that we like from UI, but they're less. They're not as big. They're not as heavy, and they're not cheap, but they're a lot cheaper, or a lot less expensive than the UI transformers. So the chassis and the transformers are the main area where you actually see a visual difference. And that it's we did everything we could to optimize, so you don't have the same level of upgradability. It's not everything is in modules, or a lot is still in modules, but the preamp, for instance, in an RI 101 integrated amplifier is not based on modules, or if there's an upgrade, it's the board that has to be changed and not just modules. On the power amp side, it's still a module. On the preamp and the phono stage and the DAC, yeah, it's still modules, but it's all optimized as much as we could for the price that we make. And yeah, if you read the reviews, I mean, I've seen lots of reviews where people say, yeah, they've listened to, for instance, an SIO25, and then they listen to an RI 100 or now an RI 101, and they say, well, you would expect a huge difference. But there is actually not a huge difference. There's a different way of presentation, so to speak. Where the SIO25 is more like I wouldn't say old-fashioned, but I'm sure you know what I mean. Class A type of sound. It's on the romantic side, if you want. Where the RI is it's not leaner, but compared, that's the best word I can think of, because it's definitely not lean, but it doesn't have the same, let's say, Class A virtues as an SIO25. So kind of the best way I can explain it.
Sure. Let me. We're getting a lot of questions, so we will move on to our viewers' questions very shortly. I have two questions left. Let's talk about the SIA30 integrated amplifier that you've used last year at Munich High-End Show. Yep. I know from our conversations for a very long time, it has been a project that has been taking a lot of your time over the last couple of years, if not more.
Oh, wow. I think it's a lot more than that.
If you can talk us about the design and about the new integrated amplifier, which is just a phenomenal amplifier, and it's just won several awards around the world. First one in the US with the product of the year for 2019 by Peter Breuninger at AV Showrooms. We're going to basically have a lot more reviews coming up in the next following months, hopefully. We're in the works, but everyone is so curious about the design in terms of I know for a fact, just to give you a hint, you have mentioned when we were together at the shows and then going around to our dealers last year after Rocky Mountain Audio Fest, you were mentioning that you spent more than 6 months just to align the angles and the components inside the chassis so that you will have a natural airflow, so you don't have to use a fan. And just to give you a starting point and take it from there on from me.
Well, first of all, I have to say that at this particular point, the SIO30 is probably one of our biggest prides because of the reception that we have been getting. But at the same time, it's the biggest shame, probably in my personal life as a designer, simply because it took so long. I think I first started talking about the SIO30 at least 3 years ago, probably more than 3 years ago. And with all the tools and the way we design stuff, we can normally swing around a new design in less than a year. I mean, we most of our products in the last 4 years or 5 years or so, we've actually been able to have a working prototype within 6 months without a big issue. Again, we do everything in modules, and we can go into talking a long time about EDA tools and how we utilize them. But that's probably for another time. So we have means to whether we can actually lower the design cycle quite a bit compared to the norm. And that's also why the SIO 30 stands out so much. I mean, the best, there's two things in it. One, what do you call that? The nickname it has had inside the company at the time was Mission Impossible. Because when I was telling our team what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it and what I wanted to have included, and the amount of space that I wanted, or the footprint of the resulting product to have, they just told me I was crazy and I needed to sleep more. I can't remember, but you know, we have fun, so we're a company that can make lots of jokes and also some strong ones, also especially about me, and that's cool. So yeah, it was. And the second thing is that I have to feel the product. If I don't feel the products, I don't work, or I don't function as a designer. Is the right way of putting it. And because of all these challenges and you know, me understanding and you know, that this was probably going to be absolutely impossible to do what I wanted to do, I just didn't really want to do it because I couldn't get it my way. So what's the point? That's always where it starts. But you know, at some point, it started to get real, and I started to via SolidWorks that I use, you know, have a vision with working with different models and how I could tweak things and all of that, to get a feeling for that. Yeah, it is possible. I know it's going to be a nightmare to do it, but it is possible, and I'm sure that when we sum up the cost, especially on the mechanical parts, with all the special stuff that you mentioned that we've actually done, we're not going to like the calculations or the end resulting price at all. But it just became one of those things where, yeah, I'm going to do it. And if it's not going to be a success, it's not going to be a success. And at least it's, you know, it's something I could do for myself. And so when we got to the point where we had the prototype running on the actual amplifier for a long time, it was fitting it in. That was a big challenge. And one of the main issues for me is, and I'll never forget this, when I was young, I was always dreaming about a pair of Audio Research M250, I believe they were, mono amps, because I was one of those, excuse me, ribbon guys that I was building ribbon speakers myself, and they were nightmares. So tube amps were fantastic. And I finally got a pair, and I actually never listened to them. Because as soon as I started them up, the first thing I heard was this huge fan, and I you know, it's not for me. I would never be able to live with that. So I have this thing about silence that, you know, what's the point of designing a really low, very nice, good signal to noise ratio amplifier if you have this constant hum and airflow in the background? I mean, one thing is hum from some transformers that, you know, the bigger and complex they get, bigger the risk or the more sensitive they are. But it's a different thing because fans you hear. So we realized that we, with the size of chassis and the heat generated from the electronics in general, and me all of a sudden wanting to add a DAC streamer board option and a phonostage option, which took the morale out for a couple of weeks from the design team, because they thought they were done. And here comes Mr. Crazy and wants to add stuff. You know, that we would have a huge issue with heat, and we faced that we probably would have to consider at least to put some fans in. And this is just where, you know, I just don't give up. And you know, the only thing I give up is sleep, I would say. So yeah, about 6 months in SolidWorks, doing simulations on airflow with temperatures and the full charade, and so there are features in lack of a better word, inside the chassis, which generate it basically works like a chimney. It's the simplest way I can describe it. So the hotter it gets, the bigger the airflow is. But again, me being me, I didn't want that to be something that is really visible to the eye. So unless you actually notice and really look carefully, you will not see some of the details that's put in there. And this is just what I like as a designer. So yeah, that was the last challenge that we faced with the SIO 25. Sorry, shame on me. SIO 30. I claim I'm the only one who can actually figure out all our numbers, and there you go. That solving that issue without compromising the size of the chassis. And yeah, the standard feedback we get is, "Wow, that is huge. Is that some sort of massive power amplifier?" Well, it's actually an integrated, and if you look inside, there is no space. It's impossible.
Can I just interrupt there and then? Can I just show those guys who are saying, "Oh my God, that's a huge amplifier. Is that a monoblock? Is that a stereo amplifier?" I think they haven't seen this. This was your crazy design.
Yeah, well, and that is available as an integrated amplifier.
This is an integrated amplifier.
It is a stereo amp, but this is the masterpiece stereo amp, and the challenge was that with the masterpiece mono amps, where we have 4 chassis. I mean, basically the height of the chassis of the masterpiece mono amps is the same as the SIO 30, and the masterpiece mono amps are just I think it's 10 or 11 cm deeper, and then there's 4 of them. And what we actually did with the SIO was taking the power supply, the regulated power supplies, and the transformer design and all that stuff, and wanted to squeeze it in to the SIO 30, which is why it was so difficult. One of the reasons why. But yeah, this is the masterpiece stereo amp, and what we were. The challenge was, how can we build a one chassis version of the masterpiece mono amps, and the first thing we had to give up was the regulated power supply, because it's impossible. So this is the traditional design. Well, it's not impossible, but for what we wanted to have a really high powered amp, it wasn't feasible. So this is where we used the more traditional approach with lots of capacitors, and I can't remember on top of my head, but it's 1.2 farads or something in total. And yeah, it's available as an integrated amp as well. And the cool thing with that, and it's actually the only product where we do this, you can buy a stereo amp version, and then if you want to, if you think you run out of power for some reason, and it does up to about 700 watts, 8B in 8 ohm RMS. I don't remember the specs on top of my head. You can buy another one and you can use it as a mono amp then for bi-amping, but you just go into a menu and say, "No, I want you to be a mono amp," and it sets itself. Okay. Me being
for the viewers, so that they will understand the scope of the masterpiece integrated amplifier, you need 3 power cords for it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's the same type of approach as the masterpiece mono amp, and there, of course, you have a regulated power supply for each output stage that are individual, and you have power supplies for regulated power supplies for all the digital part, and the digital part is completely separated. I love this picture. I actually haven't seen this before, so I don't know where you found that, but it is cool. There's one of me sitting on top of it, but
I've got a secret called Google.
Yeah, well, I'm in Europe. No, it's as we don't have the same level of regulated power supplies in the masterpiece stereo amp, we had to do it in a different way. So that's where you have a power cord for left channel and one for right channel, and then you have a third one which is for all the digital stuff. So you could actually, and we were talking about making one ourselves, but again, it's one of those things we never seem to get around to, having some sort of external power conditioner or filter or whatever, so you can actually have, like, you could have a Furotech or whatever that can take away some of the harmonics, and you can put the one for the power cord for the digital circuitry in that, because doesn't really matter. It's just about getting rid of noise, etc., etc. So that's the idea behind it. But yeah, if you then run mono amps, it's 6 power cords.
You must be very good buddies with some cable companies. That's all I can say.
Well, I can see there's one guy here asking about what cable we use. I mean, we've used, when we test, there's 2 different types of test, of course. There's the listening test and there's the normal test. I mean, we've used audio precision and whatnot, but today we use Rode and Schwarz, and they're not that known in the for their audio generators, but they are just on a totally different level. That's another lots of money that we spend on testing equipment, because and the reason for that is, of course, we want serial number 1 and serial number 100 or whatever. They have to be identical, so we spend a lot of time measuring. But okay. So I use normal power cords because it doesn't matter. You can't, well, at least we can't. We haven't found a way, I should say, to measure the difference between power cords and those types of setups. But for our listening room, we've used a lot. I mean, over the years we've been in business. I mean, if I started to, I can't remember half of them, first of all, and secondly, it will take a long time to actually mention them all. But we do our own cables as well that we took off the market, or yeah, we took officially off the market for 7 years or so ago, and we still have those, and they might go into production again. We haven't decided yet, but those are one of the ones that we use because we know them, and we've had them for the past 10 years at least. Our Furatech, we use Argento, we have some Yorma, we've had Purist Audio. I mean, just to name a few. There's a lot of different things out there, and we do the same with speakers actually. We're testing freaks, and from a sound point of view, I mean, we don't want to have equipment which work particularly good with a particular type of speaker or power cord or signal cable. So we test with a lot of different things just to make sure. So the amount of speakers I have, me personally, and also the company, of course, is considered a little bit over the top. But that's nothing compared to my turntable collection, which the wife is not too happy about. So yeah, that's the showroom. Yeah, Kronos, Continuum. Then there's a Kutzma XLDC. There's the what's the guy from Continuum? What's it called? The Doman. And then there's actually a Rockport. I think it's the Acapella, the first version. So,
Serious, was it?
Sorry?
Was it Serious?
No. It's one of the smaller ones. The first revision of the small one. I think it's Acapella. Or something like that, and I got it from a guy who had it for 24 years. So, and it's working perfectly. But yeah, it's I'm an analog freak. What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, you should viewers, you should join me sometime to come to Denmark to have a listening session in their showroom at the factory. Not only the system and the amplifiers and the speakers that you might see there are just off the charts, but Hans-Ole's turntable collection will drive you nuts. I mean, I'm just trying to show you a few of them, and he's just gone into the cassette players as well, so we'll talk about that later on. But
I'll put it this way. Of course, this is the what you see there in the showroom is obviously some of the premium ones, and some of them are not there anymore. We do have a Microseiki SX 8000, what they call a Mark III, and it's actually, I was told it's not a Mark III. Well, the stickers on it says the reference, and that's supposed to be the mother, or lack of a better word, for the Tech-Das Air Force One. And it's in the Japanese blue. There's only like 50 of them in the world. Picked it up in Singapore, and you know, I just can't help it. But I'm a Microseiki guy, so all the turntables I couldn't afford when I was young, you know, that's what I've been collecting. But yeah, now it's I'm going a little bit over the edge on R2Rs, I have to say, and yes, our cassette as well. I have no tapes, but
you'll soon get there.
Yeah.
Now,
anyway, we should remember questions here.
one last question, and then we're going to the viewers' questions. Everybody, we've been talking a lot about your amplifiers, but the viewers have to realize that Vitus is not just an amplifier company. You actually have CD players, you have DACs, you have phono stages. Obviously, you have the line stages as well. But can you briefly talk about your phono stages, for example? Here in the picture, I'm showing the Masterpiece double chassis phono stage, PP, otherwise known as. For the viewers, the first letter in each model is designated to the series that they belong. So if it's an R, it's a reference. If it's an S, it's signature. If it's an MP, it's Masterpiece.
Yep.
And then P is phono stage, L is line stage, and IA is integrated amplifier, M is mono, S is stereo. But can you talk about your, I think it's one of the best sounding components I've heard in my entire life, the phono stages, because it's quite a unique design in terms of adjustability and what goes behind the full phono stage.
Well, again, it's a typical example of me not listening to what people are telling me is right or wrong. So I just go ahead and do my own stuff. So the signature and masterpiece phono stages are actually 5-step phono stages. Normally, you would argue, well, the more electronics in the signal path, the worst, or the less good it gets. And yeah, that's an argument that you can't debate about, because if you think about it theoretically.
Oops. I think we've just lost Hans-Ole, so there must be a problem with the connection. Hang on with us. He just disappeared. I'm trying to get him on. Get him back on. Please bear with us.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay, you're back on.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, actually. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, carry on. You were talking about the masterpiece phono stage, in general, about the phono stages that you're basically designing.
Yeah, I mean, from an overall electronic point of view, we use 5 steps in the signature and masterpiece, and normally you would see 3 stages only, and there's a long story behind that. The other thing that we do, because I'm a lazy guy, so I want to be able to remote control everything. So setting loads and gains and all of that stuff is done from a remote control. Of course, you can do it from the chassis directly in front of the unit itself, but it's easier to do from a remote. And of course, we use relays for that, and relays on signals at the size that they have is always a little bit of a challenge, because relays have coils in them, and coils are noisy. So there's a whole set of things that you have to do to work around the issues that comes from that. So of course you could say that's a challenge that we could avoid by not including those features. But again, it's just the typical approach that we have. And so yeah, I mean, we don't use any, well, the subsonic filter that we have, that's basically the only capacitor you have in the signal path. The whole phono correction or rear correction in itself is done as a shunt. In the masterpiece phono stage, we use a 2.2 microfarad Dulon copper capacitor. We do make it available in silver as well, but the silver prices went nuts. So the price for those 4 large silver coils are absolutely crazy, and have been for a long time. Everything is balanced from input to output, and that goes again for signature and masterpiece. And the reference series phono stage is a little more normal because again, you have to optimize on price a little bit. So doing everything balanced is twice the price from an electronic point of view if you want to do it in the right way. And that's only the start, because then you need to make sure when you do real balanced that the in-phase part and the out-of-phase parts, that they're absolutely identical. And if they're not, you basically introduce distortion. So the precision of components, et cetera, and pairing and all of that, it takes a lot more time. So
understood.
So that's short on the phono stage. Again, I mean, it's I'm a turntable freak, so probably the thing that I play around with the most in my spare time is turntables and phono stages for some reason. So yeah, people also asked me just to very briefly touch on digital. When we brought out the SCDO25, which is basically designed as a DAC with a transporting and the masterpiece DAC, what type of source that we were using, and yeah, analog. We used actually I used the Continuum and the Doman and some of the other turntables together with our masterpiece phono stage as a reference for the digital, and I'm analog.
Let's go to viewers' questions. First question comes from Paul. In regards to the manufacturing process, he asked, is that a unique differentiating manufacturing process for you from other manufacturers in your industry? The likes of the machinery that you use?
Of course, that's extremely difficult for me to answer, because I don't know every company around the world. If you look at, just to mention some of the ones that I actually do know or have seen pictures from their factories, you look at the likes of Name and Lin. Of course, they are a much bigger company than most in the real high end industry. I'm not talking quality of products. I'm talking about the mentality high end. I mean, they have machines, the top of the top SMT lines from Siemens, which is considered the Rolls Royce. But the reason they're considered the Rolls Royce is they can run 24/7, 2, 3, 4 times as long before they need service as a normal machine. Then you have the rest of the middle ground of machines, and this is where our machines are in. Swiss precision. We can do down. It's also about talking about the precision. It's also about the size of components that you can actually put in, and we can put down to 0.05, 0.1 or something. The smallest that you can get, that you can hardly see with the bare eye. So we can go into that as well. So we're future proof. And then you have the machines which are considered like the prototype machines. And you can get full automatic prototype machines, and you can get semi-automatic prototype machines, and those machines are the type of machines we had before we upgraded, and this is what we typically see from other manufacturers in our field. But I don't think a lot of our type of companies have these type of machines, or integrate them the way that we do with our ERP systems. We are controlling the age of the components. For how long do we store them, and if we've stored them for too long, we throw them out. We don't reuse them, etc. I don't think, or I don't know many in our industry that is doing it the way we do. But apart from that, I mean, I can't comment.
Fair enough. The next question comes from Louise, and it's somewhat related to the first question. What do you think has been your best improvement from your early manufacturing to the new products coming out of the production line?
From a manufacturing point of view, I guess, or product point of view.
Tough question.
It's that's a tough question. I mean, evolution, right? I to be honest, I can't even remember what the old products sounded like. We still have some on stock, but we don't sit down and listen to them. I mean, as an example, we started with battery because that's where you get the least noise from. And then there's EU directives coming out or being planned that with all the ROS part that lead-free lead-acid batteries were not allowed in consumer audio. So we kind of had to design a power supply that worked as well as the batteries. And that was a difficult task. But I think especially on the power supply, we've moved a lot especially over the past 6 years or so, and we continue to improve. Of course, with the with our small signal modules, the small signal path in general, that's where we spend a lot of energy. Measuring, improving, and again, the devil is in the details. So it's difficult for me to give a simple, short answer to. And just really briefly, from a production point of view, I mean, we started like everybody else. So the first many products that we were making, we didn't like SMD components at all because everything was hand soldered. Because again, we couldn't get subcontractor EMSs to really care about us because we were too small. And even if you go to a company or an EMS or smaller EMS and say, yeah, I need 100 of these, or I need 200, 250, or whatever hundreds of this particular board, if it's not in the thousands, they don't really care about it.
Yeah.
So of course, and then we went into SMD anyway, and we were still hand soldering. Compared to that, I can say that the quality from the very, very early models and today is just non-comparable. That's for sure.
Okay. Next question.
Sorry for interrupting. I would say that I'm very, very happy if you collect the answers and there are people that want to have a more in-depth reply to it. I'm very happy to try and answer that on email. So just fire away afterwards. Sure. Give me a little bit of time to reply though.
Please send your questions if it's left unanswered, or if you demand more details to your questions, send them over to me at oz@highendbyoz.com, and I will liaise it with Hans-Ole and we'll get back to you with the detailed answers. The next question comes from Dexter, and his question is regarding the digital. Are any of the DAC design circuit topologies shared between components in the same Vitus series or across multiple series? Benefits or performance gains in DACs used in reference and signature series?
Well, in signature and masterpiece, from the DAC chip point of view, we still use very old technology because we still really like the sound of the analog device, AD 1955, I believe it is. The main difference between the signature and the masterpiece in that aspect is the amount of DACs that we put in parallel, and it's also the clock circuitry around it. And the sample rate converter module is also different between the two. In reference series currently, and also actually the SIO 30 DAC streamer module. So reference series and the new DAC streamer module for SIO 30, we use the ESS top model. Don't remember their model number on top of my head, but this is because we introduced streaming, and we wanted to be able to utilize that to its fullest extent, and so we needed the newest technology, and that's why we chose that. So, but yeah, we share as much technology between the different lines as possible with differentiations, and it's again it's the number of chips, it's the attention to the power supply, to the clock circuitry, etc., etc. That's where the main differences are.
Okay. Next question comes from Peter Christian, and how your amps interact with the dynamics of speaker impedance?
That's a good question. It's also a very, very difficult one to answer in a short way. Well, what can I say? I'm not exactly sure what you mean with the question in terms of where I should go with the answer, but I feel it's more like terms of easy to difficult loads. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Well, at the end of the day, one of the things that we hear a lot is, well, if you look at our power specs, that they're quite low. And there are many reasons for that. The first thing that I need to say is that all our specs is always 8 ohm RMS, where the norm, so to speak, in the industry is 4 ohm peak, and there's almost a 3 multiply of 3 difference with that is 2.88. So if you see a 100 watt amp from us, it's 288 watts from another, if of course they use 4 ohm peak. So that's one thing to be aware of. The second thing is it's not about watts as such. It's really the driving capability of an amplifier comes really from current, and that comes back to the power supply. And the reason why we use UI transformers, and that is particularly, and it's a custom UI transformer, and the platform design took about 4 years to get right. And one of the main criteria there was actually the percentage that we would lose from open loop to closed loop, because this is enemy number one when it comes to dynamics. If you have an the amplifiers, simplified of course, the amplifier output stage in itself is not so much the limiting factor. The first limiting factor is actually the power supply, because when you start really drawing current from the amp, if the power supply gives up before the output stage does, well, so that's why our power supplies are so overly over-dimensioned, and always, apart from reference series, use the UI transformer. Of course, it depends on the type, but that's why it's really a complex question, or complex to answer, because it's not only about the efficiency of the speaker and the driving capabilities of the amplifier. It's also about the size of the room and is the room hard or soft, or all of these things. It all comes into a big equation. So there is really no simple answer. Can our amplifiers drive everything? No. It depends. I will put it this way: we have customers driving Apogee scintillas with SIO 30s and even SIO 25s, and they're extremely happy. But again, an SIO 25 with that type of load, you're not going to listen to rock concert levels with that. But if the room is not huge and is not over damped, it can still work. So it's a complex question. So that's why it's a good question.
Let's move on to a second question from Luis, and he wants to know, how do you battle against the environmental noise, RF junk from the wall, etc.?
Is there such a thing? Well, that's also a very good question. Again, we do stuff in the transformer. In the power amplifiers, we don't have filters and all of that stuff. Well, we do have some filters. We try and take away some of the DC, and we do some mild filtering. But majority of what we do in the power amplifiers is actually in the power supply. Lots of shielding, etc., etc., etc. And again, also on the PCB layout, we spend a lot of time doing as much shielding without actually shielding. Sounds stupid, I know. It's difficult to explain, to minimize influence of any RF in general. On all the non-power amplifiers and digital, we do have a standard EMI filter on the input, but we still do all of the usual stuff on board level in the transformers. I hope that answered the question.
Second question from Paul. This is a number of questions, actually.
Make me our number one.
Stage of the I think this is the most common question you get for the last 3-4 months.
Yeah.
The second question is, what future SIA 30 phono stage will offer? I think this is very easy to answer now. For you. I know the answer. Will this phono stage be modular? I'll answer that, yes. Will any upgrades or components be available for additional fee for the SIA 30 phono stage?
Well, let's start with number one. Very good question, and unfortunately, I can't give a real answer at this particular point in time. And I know this is absolutely just annoying, and it annoys the heck out of me as well. It's almost like reliving the whole story about the SI 030 in general. But there are specific reasons, and we've always talked quite a bit about them. And that is, I just refuse to compromise, and I want this to actually be a real phono stage. So I want to have remote control, remote controlled input selection. There's going to be 2 inputs, and I want remote control selection between the 2. I want to have remote control selection on load and on gain. And the enemy number 1, together with the coils of the relays, is a huge 20+ kilo transformer. That and one of the negatives about a UI transformer is actually it's not the right word of using radiation. I can't think of the right word right now. So this is why we went to through a lot of considerations when we did the whole chassis and how we would implement everything. So it's very, very complex. And no, I don't necessarily want to support 0. or 100 microvolts output cartridges, but I want to go as close as I possibly can. And all of a sudden, a fairly simple task becomes extremely complex. And it doesn't help that we're in this situation that we're in right now, because even though that we are almost kind of working normally, a lot of our subcontractors aren't. So some of the parts that I need for further R&D, I just can't get right now. And my sincere hope is that I can finish it within this year, and actually latest bring it to market very, very early next year. It's an absolute head on the chopping block commitment from me that if everything goes wrong, it will definitely be in Munich next year. Now I can't remember the other questions. They were on the screen before. So
okay,
the feature.
Components will be available for an additional fee for SI30 phono stage.
So I'm not sure I understand that question in terms of options.
Could it be like when you have the gain settings and the loading settings, and if it's out of that, will it be possible to basically have a custom made one?
Oh yeah.
I think that.
So now I understand. Yeah, I mean, if as long as we at order entry we are told that there are some potential specific requirements for loading and gains, etc., we will definitely accommodate that. And I can't even say if we would charge extra for that. I don't think so, because again, that's another good thing with having the full production in house. We can quickly do an extra board without huge extra cost. So I don't think we would charge for that.
Okay.
But as long as it's those type of things, in terms of general upgradability, I mean, it is a module and it's user changeable from the rear of the chassis. So well, it's a module in itself.
Okay. On to the next question. It comes from Prem. I think this is one of those controversial questions, because it's like opening up a can of worms, but there we go.
Yep.
I have an SI25 Mark II. Do you recommend the PC directed to the wall or to the power conditioner?
Oh, and I have a perfect answer, and it's very political. It really depends on the quality of your mains. Generally speaking, we do not recommend power conditioners for any of our integrated and power amplifiers, especially not the ones with the UI transformer, which the SI025 has. And again, the reason is that most of them will actually act as a limiter to what the amplifier can do because of the specific design of the transformer. That being said, I mean, I've traveled around the world and I've seen this, both in UK but especially in Asia, in one situation where there was actually a power meter display on the wall. See the mains voltage go from 208 volts, I think it was, to 248 or something within a matter of minutes. I mean, this is of course not ideal or an ideal situation for any electronics. So in situations like that, yeah, I would definitely recommend it. But you know, it's personal taste and it's trial and error. I can't be the judge of that. For me personally, I've actually tried a lot of them at home to try and figure out if there were any that worked better or differently than others. And I have to be honest, I didn't like any of them. And I'm using an SIO 30 at one of the prototypes. That's all I can get at this point. You know, that's the best answer I can give.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Martin, coming from Canada, this question. What is your approach to aftercare, especially in the context of used second-hand market Vitus pieces?
That's a very good.
I think
another good question.
To say.
Yeah, it's not a secret that our normal approach, and this is a very, very old approach from the very early days, that there's full warranty for the first owner and nothing for the second owner. But we are working on that. The general DNA of the company is very simple, and that is after sales service in general has a higher priority than new sales. And what I mean with that, I mean that if we have a backlog of orders and we're busy with that, and there are somebody who has an issue that with a product that they already purchased, regardless of the channel, that takes priority from us. You know, we have to take care of customers one way or the other, and we are working on different ways of dealing with that. There are specific programs for the Americas that we are discussing with us at this point, and we are working on changing our warranty in general. So the warranty is used to be 3 years. It's going to be standard 2 years moving forward, but then with the option of doing a registration and receiving 4 additional years. So actually, we go from 3 years to 6 full years of warranty, and we are definitely going to introduce a transfer on warranty as well. But we're still working on the details on that, and we do have a few other things that we have to finish at this particular point of time. But within this year, we will have a plan for that. There are multiple ideas, but we like to be different than anyone else, so we're trying to think of this in an alternative approach that will make it easier and better for the customer.
And if I may add to that, Martin, to that answer that Hans just gave to you, as the North American distributor for Vitus audio products, both in the US and Canadian market, the first thing we've done is basically look at our servicing capabilities in relation and in also support by Hans-Ole in Denmark. So we are capable of basically serving the Vitus products here in the US, in Los Angeles. But more importantly, in conjunction with the new warranty program that Vitus is working on, we're also basically about to introduce through our dealers a certification program for our second-hand products. So our dealer network, authorized dealer network, if they were to have a second-hand Vitus product, they're going to check it from 23 different points, both operationally and cosmetically. And then we as a distributor will issue a certified second-hand Vitus product logo to that product. So you will have a piece of mind when you talk to our dealers regarding those products. And also there will be other tiers of certification, which I will announce hopefully in the near future. But like Hans said, and you know, somebody at the beginning of the interview said, "Oh, do you guys have the same barber?" I think we share a lot of the ideas as well. So we want to basically make the Vitus experience for consumers a 360-degree sort of experience. In other words, it doesn't stop on the new product sale. It just continues with service and aftermarket, you know, holding the hands of the consumer throughout the lifespan of Vitus products to the best of our capability. Now, The next question, I hope that answers questions, Martin. And if you want further details, please contact me directly at oz@highendbyoz.com, and I will basically get the answer from the man himself and forward it to you. The next comes from Australia, from Anne. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. My friend had a pair of Dynaudio Consequence speakers. Which Vitus amp can drive these pieces?
Are those the old ones, the huge ones, the tweeter at the bottom, or is that the newer one?
That's the one. That's the one.
Okay, I don't have any personal experience with them. Again, it's not only, we kind of touched on that subject a little bit already with one of the other questions. It really comes down to not only the speaker and the amplifier. It comes down to the size of the room, and the hardness or softness of the room. I will put it this way, that we, as I mentioned earlier, we have many speakers in the factory, and some of them has, oh, those are the one, yeah, has, what do you call it? Just lost the word there. Sensitivity, sorry, of about 80 to 82 dB, and we don't really in our room, in our listening room, showroom, which is about 70 square meters and a fairly balanced from a acoustical point of view. And with the way we listen to things, we don't have any issues with that type of speakers with any of our amplifiers. But you know, if the room is just a little bit over medium size, I would definitely go for the like the SS103 or above that, for sure.
And just to give detail about the speaker, 85 dB at 4 ohms, which I don't necessarily think will be a problem with any of the Vitus amps. It's just like Hans said, depends on the room and depends on how you fill the room and your music preferences as well.
Follow the dealer and ask him to bring it. Not right now, of course, but.
The next one is again from Anne, and it's SI830. There are two modes, Class A and Class AB. Which would you recommend to listen to?
Personal preferences, I would say. There's 4 modes, because one of the special features we have in our output stagers is the difference between rock mode and classic mode. And very briefly on that, classic mode is our classical topology and configuration of the output stage. Has nothing to do with music. It's just classic for us. And rock mode is then a new way of configuring the output stage, and that is, we call it rock because it's a little more forward. Is the best way I can describe it. And that combined with both Class A and AB. So we actually have 4 different sound settings, so to speak. And again, you know, it depends. For me, when I listen to classical music, I always listen in Class A and classic mode. If I listen to rock or you know, any techno or whatever it might be, really energetic music, or I could probably, would probably most of the time listen to rock mode and Class AB, and that's what the modes are there for. It's really figuring out what you prefer in combination with the room, cable, speaker, source that you have. That's exactly why we did it the way. I have to say that the initial reason why we have the Class A and AB switch is, again, because we're in Denmark and the electricity is extremely expensive. This was way before there was anything about being green. But it was really a matter of people did not like Class A amplifiers because they were way too expensive, because people just left them on because they take forever to warm up. So if you didn't sit down and actually really listen to it, it was just expensive to run. So that's why we introduced the Class AB button, because you don't need to draw as much power. And the added benefit from that actually is, for me personally and in the factory as well, and most of the customers that I talk to, we never switch off the power amplifiers. Just put them in AB and mute. Because then when you come back and you want to listen, and if you want to listen in Class A, it takes half an hour, maybe, depending on room temperature, of course, but between half an hour and 1 hour, and the amplifiers are fully warm and ready to go. And on that note,
Okay.
I did see another question about the comparison about the SS103 and the SS102 in terms of Class A. Yeah, there it is. No, it is absolutely true.
How do you compare the stereo amplifier?
Yep.
My first impression is that the amplifier is not as hot using Class A in comparison with the predecessor SS102.
And that is absolutely correct. It runs the same amount of power in Class A. And again, the difference is really in the mechanical design and the airflow. So some of the things that we're doing in the SIO30 that we took to extreme, we already kind of started doing in the SS and SM103 series, which means there is more ventilation and chimney effect in the chassis than there was on the previous models. So it doesn't run as warm. And that is a very, very good thing, not only for the environment, but also for lifetime of the amplifier. And our lifetime is normally, if you take the old-fashioned type of Class A amp, you would say after between 5 or 10 years, whatever it was, you would have to change the capacitors because they were, just run out because of temperature. I mean, we have a customer in Scandinavia who has a pair of the first SM100, and we stopped production of those in 2006, and I think his is from 2005, and there's nothing there. I mean, we did a service on them, and there's absolutely nothing to do. I mean, we recalibrated them, and that was basically it. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of Class A, because again, there we do things differently. It's not so much for us if it's 30 watt Class A, 40 watt Class A, 100 watt Class A, or whatever it is. That's not really the point for us. One of the things that we found out in the research from 95 to 2003 was the type of output devices that we use, that when they hit a certain temperature, that they just started to breathe. And so that's actually what we designed for. So the core temperature of the output device, where that reaches about 70 degrees Celsius in that area, that's where the whole thing starts to sound the way that we want them to sound. And that's really a part of the signature of our power amplifiers. And I can go really into detail on that, but very briefly, it has to do with some of the parasite capacitors, which is left in the die, because there is no such thing as an ideal component. So we did a lot of research in that area. So again, the amount of Class A is not really important for us. The temperature of the output device, that's really the important thing for us.
Okay, the next question is something that you love. I'm pretty sure you're not going to go too much into detail of this, and I know your answer because I asked you this about a week ago. Here it is. It comes from Prem. Also, would like to know, changing the fuse, any recommendations?
Experiment. I mean,
oh my God. Prem, you are so lucky because he's in front of the camera live and he's giving you a very political answer.
Oh, well, I've done a lot of testing. I've done a lot of testing. Maybe I'm old, maybe I need a hearing aid. I can't say. I don't think personally that I hear the differences that would make me want to invest in fuses. And I know this can sound really strange when we start talking about power cords and all that stuff, but maybe I've just been unlucky. I will say that one of the things that we are very, very fortunate to have in Denmark is extremely clean and very stable mains. So some of the issues that we see around the world, we just don't have them here. I mean, we are 230 volts plus minus 6%, and when we measure in our house, it's 228, and it goes from 227.7 to 228.3 or something. That's really and I'm a tech geek, freak, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I have a data logger on it, so I'm measuring it over time. And we did the same in the factory, and it's pretty much the same. So I don't know if that has a play in that, but to give a really maybe funny answer is just put the right value in, please. for your own sake.
For the SIA30, I can tell you because I've just tested it a week ago. Is 2 slow blow small 10 A's, correct?
Yep.
And I have tested the hi-fi tuning Supremes, both on the SCD25 and the SIA30, and I have tested a few others that that you might be aware of, but I would rather not tell their name because they can understand it the wrong way. But my comparisons between those that are readily available, which has color coding to give you a clue about the brand, I found hi-fi tuning sounding much better. Let's move on to a follow-up. Are there any dealers in Canada, Martin, at the moment? But we're soon going to have one. So please send me an email and I will keep you posted on that one. That's a question related to me. Another question comes from Paul. What apps can be used to control the DAC streamer module on your iOS or Android phone or
You're dropping out a bit. So you have to put the question up again, but I'm going to answer another or comment on another question there from a Larry. Us needs Ramstein mode. Yeah.
Yep.
Good one. I have an extra of the full black collectible boxes in vinyl, unopened, if you're interested. Okay, so what apps can be used to so the streamer? Okay, so the standard app for that is M Connect or M Control. You already noticed I'm not really a streamer guy. And we do hear people not liking it and this and that, and that's a fair assumption. In theory, everything should really work because it is just about having the Vitus audio node IP address that you stream to, and as long as you have I've tested the Lin Kazoo or something, I think, and I've tested a few others, and they work quite well. It most should work, but we haven't been able to really do excessive tests on that. Yeah, that's at this point the best answer I can give. We're still. I would follow up on that and say we're still fairly young in the whole streaming part, and we do have some young people hired that are looking into that. I am streaming, but it's a music server, so the actual normal streaming thing is it's not something I'm really knowledgeable about. Sorry.
Okay. The question comes from Anne, and I think I can answer this. The Vitus streamer for the SIA30 is shipping already, so you can basically buy it, take 4 screws at the back of the amplifier, slide the board in, and then put the screws back on and update the software via the USB, and you're off. So the streamer module is available. The second question, I will leave it to Hans. Even though I have some views as well, but I will be happy to answer them over an email. Would you recommend a built-in streamer or a separate unit, namely MSB reference DAC?
I have no idea what their MSB reference DAC retails for, because that's one place to start. MSB is really known for digital. They're quite good at that. We probably come from the sound point of view from a different background. I'm a musician. I'm not a professional musician, but I goof around. So I understand the sound of the instruments, and I have a very direct comparison. And that's really that's where we come from. I want things to sound the way I hear them when I'm behind my drum set, or I play back whatever I might be goofing around with. So that's really our approach to that. The idea behind the built-in modules are, of course, that we see a lot of people wants to downsize. We've actually had people coming from a full masterpiece system to an SIO30 because they just didn't want to have a huge system anymore. And if that's the approach, well, getting as close as possible to have a one-box solution is, of course, what they're after. But you should compare, you should check. I mean, the server that I'm using is at home at this point is a Request Audio that has the MSB DAC inside. I'm not using the MSB DAC. I'm using some other brands that I know quite well. So it's tests.
Denmark,
that's all I can say. Huh? Sorry?
Handmade in Denmark by any chance?
Yeah, could be. Well, the thing is, my home system is a test system. I'm goofing around and experimenting and doing R&D. So when I sometimes have people over and they're telling me, yeah, we're coming by for having a listen. I have to spend a couple of days cleaning everything up so nobody gets hurt.
Okay. And as for Larry's comment about needing a Rammstein mode, I just want to make sure that for our viewers that we didn't make a huge mistake today, and I'm just going to prove it on camera. Most of you might have seen this, but a reporter from these are funny days with coronavirus, right? Everybody's working from home. It's a little bit sort of hard to handle from time to time. And some of these reporters are actually working from home too. And they're on live TV, just like we're on live broadcast right now. So it happened, I think, yesterday on one of the US channels, and I think it's ABC. The reporter came on with the tie and the jacket and everything, but he forgot to wear the trousers. Just to show you here, it was all fine upstairs, but downstairs was not really in place. Just to make sure that we are wearing trousers, at least for myself. I don't know about Hans-Ole.
Well, let's not go there.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to our next question. Fabrizio is asking a question. Vitum's amps are often paired with energy-consuming speakers. Is it due to the big transformers?
No. Actually, thinking about it, it would have been good to say, yeah, this is all a marketing strategy we have, so we can show that our amplifiers really can push even difficult loads. But that is actually not the case. I mean, in Munich, we've used a Gauder, and Gauder are fairly inefficient because of the way he's building the crossovers, and we have absolutely no issues with that. But no, we have another German speaker from Berlin in our showroom right now, and their efficiency is like 100 and some dB, 101 or whatever it is. So no, it's not by choice. I mean, everything we do is by choice, but it's based on sound results, not anything else really. So yeah.
Okay, I can add to that. Prior to the distribution of Vitus, I had in my showroom several other brands, and one of the most notorious speakers in terms of being a difficult load is MBL, which is 83 dB at 4 ohms. And I have never heard the MBLs sound that good with the RI-101. Actually, if you go back and search Google for some of the highlights of Expono 2018, where I presented with Vitus RI-101 and MBL bookshelves, which is exactly the same thing, even if it's the bookshelf or the extreme with MBL, it's 83 dB at 4 ohm. Even the seasoned reviewers and MBL fans, which I won't name, some of the reviewers are, they said they've never heard the MBL this coherent. And it's just basically boils down to what Hans was explaining in terms of not the watts only itself, but it's just the transformer that makes it, because it gives you the current. Let's move on to the next question.
Just to quickly finish that off, I mean, the whole thing about the current is maintaining the voltage wing, but providing the current. That's really it, instead of losing the current, because then you lose energy, and that's really in where it lies.
Okay. Pram has another question. What tips to improve the sound quality? Like, is it good to disable the unused inputs, use XLR over its RCA, etc.?
No, it makes no difference. The reason for that is just a feature, and the reason we put that in is because I can use myself as an example. I really only have two. Well, right now I have three sources. I have turntable, I have an R2R, and I have a streamer. But there's five inputs or six inputs sometimes. And the way that we build things, we don't have a direct select on the remote control. You can go to input one, then to input three, then to input four. So it's really just to say, okay, when I'm toggling around or through the different inputs, I don't want to toggle through the ones that I'm not using, so I can just disable them, so the software just jumps over them. That's really the only reason.
Okay.
One thing I would say that is extremely important for overall sound quality in general is grounding. Um, I mean, we've experimented a lot with grounding on chassis, and you see some of our chassis, on some of our products, like the Masterpiece, the line stage. Of course, there is on the phono stage, but even on the line stage, we have an extra grounding binding post on the back, so you're able to ground the chassis. That does make a big difference. And actually, coming back to the other question there was before in terms of early on with RF, that's actually another way of eliminating or helping limiting the level of RF that comes in. So that's one thing I would say. We've experimented with that. There's all sorts of different products that does it. You can do it in a fairly simple way to test it without spending a lot of money on it. And we've heard some quite impressive results with that.
Mm-hmm. Question I will answer in a different way if you allow me, Hans. Since this is predominantly for the US market, the Vitus streamer DAC module for the SIA30 is going to retail for $6,500 in the US. And then you can basically contact your distributor in Australia, and they will basically let you know about the retail price, or Hans-Ole directly. I have a question for you. There's one more question.
You know everything.
There's one question coming from Johnny, but actually this was a very recent conversation that I had with Dan, who asked a question earlier on, who's our New York dealer, by the way. And he's quite, he's just amazing in his setup. And he's very knowledgeable and very passionate. But he's also a dealer for Symposium racks. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And one of their top of their line model, which is basically using solid copper pillars, let's put it that way, has a grounding option on the rack itself. Do you recommend using and grounding the SIA30 or the Vitus products overall with a product like that, or do you want to basically just omit that and move on?
You're asking me?
Yes, that's a question for you from me.
Well, I mean, I can't. I've heard the Symposium. I've seen them used with our products, but I don't have a first-hand experience other than that. I mean, I can't judge whether one is better than the other. I mean, the key thing in terms of grounding is making sure that every single chassis, from an electronic point of view, and the rack for that matter, are grounded to the same potential. So they share a common ground. That is the key thing, because if you have different levels of noise, voltage on different grounds, it looks cool. Then that will create all sorts of issues, not in terms of functionality, but in terms of sound. Different potentials, different references. If it gets really bad, it can actually introduce distortion. So yeah, I mean, grounding is definitely, or equal potential is another way of putting it. Is definitely key. and if a rack provides that, use it. I mean,
okay. Johnny is making an invitation slash making our mouths water by saying, when are you guys coming back to Houston for some boozes? Well, Johnny, we're itching to come, but thanks to this COVID-19 and the travel restrictions, we're just basically waiting. But hopefully, we will make it sooner than later. And
I think from my point of view, even though, of course, we are extremely lucky in Denmark compared to a lot of the areas around the world, we are not. I'm probably not traveling this year, but this is not really related to that. This is more a we are really busy and have lots of stuff to do kind of thing. So and of course, no need to take any unnecessary chances. So, but I'm very happy for the invitation. I think after showing the pictures from last time, especially some of the bottles, I'm quite sure I'm not allowed to travel alone this time.
Well, Johnny, this is good news. If Britta is coming over, at least we will have more for ourselves to drink because Hans-Ole will be under control.
Oh, you have no idea.
Well, since this is the last of our questions, I want to thank Hans-Ole to give us this opportunity, and also thank you very much for taking the viewers' questions. And for our viewers, thank you for joining us. Next week, we're going to have a similar live stream broadcast interview with Audio Solutions and Audio Solutions owner and the chief designer. And then after that, we have a surprise for you. Hopefully, we will get a surprise manufacturer online that we usually cooperate with, and it could be an interesting topic for everyone. And finally, right after we finish the first three manufacturers, we're going to have a interview with our dealer network, and we're going to introduce you to our dealers as well, of Vitus and Audio Solutions as well. So you will have questions to ask them directly, what they see in terms of the reception that they get for our products, and it will be fun. So I want to thank everyone, including Hans-Ole and all our viewers. I wish everyone a good day, and now you can go back to Corona, Hans-Ole.
I'm on water. I'm sorry, and I want to say thank you for inviting me. This is actually the first time that we've done anything like this, and I'm quite sure it will not be the last. Thank you everybody for coming, asking good questions. As said, any other questions you might have, as difficult as you can think of, just ask them to us, and we will train him and get you some answers. Thank you.
Excellent, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.